So let's talk about the college list first. So what are the first steps to creating a list? So the first step really is to identify the major or majors you will apply for. Now, why is this important? Because what you study in college will shape a lot of your experience at the school and later on in life. And increasingly, colleges want students who have an idea of what they want to study. So the best starting point is to identify the major that you want, and then create a list of the top 100 schools for your major using some sort of online resource or platform. So the platform that I like the most is Niche, so niche.com. They're a wonderful resource, and they help lots of students create tailored college lists, and it's a completely free service. So once you have this list of 100 schools, what do? Well, you can filter out schools based on a variety of factors: geography, public versus private schools, student body size, campus life, so you can focus on what students say, and Niche provides those insights, and also cost, so the average cost after financial aid. And so typically what you'll do is you'll take that list of 100 and you'll whittle it down, okay, to maybe, let's say, 25 to 50 schools. So you're really cherry picking the schools that you want. And so for the schools that remain, what you'll likely do is utilize your GPA and SAT score to categorize the schools. And 3 categories that we like to use as admissions counselors are reach, realistic, and safety. And so it's good to have schools in each of those categories on your college list. Now we'll talk about, how you define reach, realistic, and safety later on, but just keep those categories in the back of your mind. So now that you have this rough list, what do? Well, the last step is to really dig into the information that's publicly available to you. So you can visit school websites, you can take virtual tours, you can take in-person tours, you can attend information sessions, you can utilize third-party resources like the US News and World Report, Princeton Review, the Fisk Guide to Colleges. You can also talk to students at these schools to get a sense of what it's like to be a student on campus. And then, with that 5th step, you likely have whittled down that list of, let's say, 20 to 25 schools to maybe 10 to 15. So now let's talk about what do reach, realistic, and safety mean? Because they're words, and they're very subjective words. And here's what I mean by that, because oftentimes when I work with students, they'll come up with a list on their own and they'll say, John, I've got this great list and I know exactly what schools are reach, what schools are realistic, and what schools are safety. And, more often than not, students make an honest approach, an honest attempt to categorize schools. So how should you categorize schools into these 3 categories? So if you're looking at reach schools, typically the combination of your GPA and SAT score are going to be less than the averages. So maybe less than 40% of admitted students. So when you use one of the sort of admissions chance calculators like on Niche or other websites, you're typically going to see that you're falling in the 40th percentile or below. And then you've got realistic schools. So realistic schools, basically your GPA and your SAT are close to the averages that are published. So somewhere between the 40th and 75th percentile, you're right in the middle, and you're not guaranteed to get in. You shouldn't be incredibly confident, but you've got a chance. You've got a strong chance that you can get in. It's realistic. And then finally, you've got your safety schools. And this is where typically your GPA and your SAT score combined are well above the averages. You're at the 75th percentile or higher. And that's, you're fairly confident that you can get in. So that's how, at a high level, you define schools as being reach, realistic, and safety. Now, there are some caveats. If you are applying for an impacted major, such as engineering, anything engineering or computer science related, or to a lesser extent business, this formula won't help you as much. Now, why? Specifically for Asian American applicants, particularly boys, applying for engineering and CS programs, the competition is very high. So what does that mean? That means a school that simply based on GPA and SAT scores seemed realistic, it's probably going to be reach. And some of those schools just going based on the published data that may have seemed safety likely are going to get bumped more into the realistic category. So if you're applying for an impacted major, specifically engineering or CS, and also to a certain extent business, you're going to have to apply some you'll have to apply some additional filters to really get at the 3 categories of schools on your list. So one of the recommendations that I give students, whether they work with me or they work with another counselor, is to create your final list with someone who's a professional in the field. So you might have a counselor at your high school that's a college counselor. Of course, you could find someone like me. And what you'd want to do is meet one-on-one with that counselor and review what you think are going to be the reach, realistic, and safety schools. Come in with a perspective. So utilize the filtering that I've mentioned, because when you do that, you can really impress that counselor. And what they'll do is they'll deliver better feedback to you in terms of your assumptions around fit and likelihood. And fit being, are you going to be a good match for the school? And then likelihood, is your categorization of reach, realistic, and safety accurate? So what's the really good formula? What's the sweet spot when it comes to creating a college list? Well, typically I recommend students to have a balanced list of at least 10 schools that covers all 3 categories: reach, realistic, and safety. And so a convenient formula is what I call the 4-4-2 formula: 4 reach, 4 realistic, and 2 safety.